Perfect. Okay, we do the Q&A right now about IOTA and anything you want to ask about IOTA. I think Andreas will join us. Yes, perfect.
So, questions?
Yeah, we don't go.
Yes, lovely.
Any questions about IOTA?
It should say carrot. It says cat.
Who is the first one who wants to ask a question about IOTA? And not about speculation or whatever. Prices.
Yeah, so I can't tell you anything about price, about upcoming news releases, or
Q.
Question was on the face.
I saw your slides. You said it's IOTA is quantum resistant. So can you elaborate a little more on that?
Okay. So essentially the way we're arguing here is that at the core of things is a hash function that is quantum resistant. That does not satisfy you.
I didn't get it.
So at the core of things, if you look at the white paper, there's a certain section about it, and at the end of the day, what we're saying is, if you're like the hash function that we're promising to use, at the core of things, if you use a quantum computer to crack it, you will not get a noteworthy speed advantage, and that's how we're arguing here.
So actually, it can actually crack it just. Like
well, we're saying quantum resistant. We're not saying like we're foolproof.
Okay.
We're just saying that you're not going to get any serious advantage.
Andreas, is it quantum resistant because of the Winternet signatures, the one-time signatures?
That also plays into it, but it's not directly relevant here because that's more an implementation of the whole thing.
Okay.
More. Sort of explain this a little bit more.
Please do if you want to.
Yeah. More questions? Just raise your hands in the back. You can throw it if you want to. Just make sure you throw a bit in the right direction. Yeah, perfect.
How about smart contracts?
See, I told you, I wrote the key up there, whatever it may be, and but I can't tell you more about it other than that we're going to be releasing something
soon.
All right. How about timestamps then?
Right. So timestamps. Okay, that works. So I'm not sure if you've been following the development of things, but at some point, 2 or 3 months ago, we added something, attachment timestamps to transactions. So you don't just have the bundle timestamp. So when a transaction was created, but also when it was attached to the network, at least when the device attaching the transaction to the network locally, whatever time it thought it was the correct time at that point in time. And then we're currently running analyses of these timestamps to figure out whether everything's happening in the way we envision it to be and whether we're confirming things. And eventually, in the not too distant future, we'll be going to start enforcing timestamps, yes.
Which is nice. There's another question, I guess.
Yes, you've shown us the use case of flash channels. Could you give us some more use cases?
More use cases of IOTA?
No, of the flash channels.
Of the flash channels. So, well, at the end of the day, it's whatever use case you can think of where you need microtransactions happening at a very high frequency. So if that is, for example, as I said earlier, this airplane situation where you're paying per kilobyte and you want to do, and you only want to pay per kilobyte, then that's good. Then you can just do all these. So the thing with flash channels is that all of these transactions happen off the tangle. Like any party that's involved in a flash channel can always attach a transaction to the tangle and thereby close it. You can also just like the value proposition here is that you can just do all of these transactions in almost real time without having to wait on any network or any external party.
So it increases the speed of confirmations, or?
Well, you don't need to wait for confirmations, so yes. I'm looking forward to that.
Sorry.
Maybe use the
yeah.
cube later on when you get it. Sorry, I'm not. It's just for the live stream.
Yes, we should use the cube. Let me get it.
We should use the cube.
The cube. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, sorry about the bump. But basically, assume that if I'm somebody who's going to be on an exchange and I'm going to be trading with an exchange for getting currency for a period of a day or something like that, I could set up a flash channel on the side with that exchange for moving transactions in and out, and then I don't need to worry about talking to additional nodes for today. Would that be correct? That I could go in and out quickly on an exchange without having to have confirmations?
Yes.
Okay.
If I got your question correctly.
So yeah,
yes.
instead of the idea of that, basically every time I transfer in and out, I have to talk to 400 or 500 nodes.
Yeah. Well, even in this case, you don't have to talk to even in a regular network case, you don't have to.
Yeah,
talk
but I'm just
nodes.
saying I could make it faster.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's you don't need to go round trip to a network. Yes. Maybe you wait for the cube. I know it's a nuisance.
That is very cool. Where do we talk in this thing? Hello? All right, this side. So my question was, you explained earlier with the Flash channel, you said, well, if there's any funds left, you just have to sort it out with your friends. Now, let's say I'm trying to do a transaction with somebody who might not be my friend, but I still want to do a transaction. Is there any way that, how do I make sure that if I don't know, I funded the channel with 100 IOTA, and then I made a transaction for 50 that I get my last 50 back? Is that when I close it, it's closed, and then how do I know where it is?
Well, so the remainder of the funds are still left in an address that is controlled by the different parties of the multi-signature address, wallet, whatever. So you will need to come to an agreement.
Okay. Yeah.
If it's just a regular one-by-one transaction, you can always have some third party that's doing escrow for you, I guess. And if you then provide that party with all the facts and all the proofs, then that party can help you release the funds if they, accept your case.
And then you could also have 2 signatures out of 3 persons?
Yeah, so there's M2N, which multisig essentially supports as well, yes.
That's pretty cool. Thanks.
Hi. I've heard multiple times that the network needs to be large enough in order to have high performance. So how big is big enough?
How big is big enough? Good question. Big in this case essentially is determined by a matter of the total hashing power of the network. So if you had, given that each individual participant in the network, that is each device, does in an idealized world proof of work on their own. That essentially means that all these individual small devices contribute to the global hashing power of the network, and thereby it becomes more and more difficult for an attacker to rewrite history, or at least to confirm transactions that shouldn't be confirmed because they're invalid, double spends, whatever you want to call it. So I can't provide you with the right numbers for this at the moment, but it's still going to be a few more weeks, months. We'll see.
Okay. And maybe it's a bit of a related question, but IOTA is supposed to be more scalable than normal blockchain. Can you elaborate on that?
Right. So that's essentially based on our concept of you don't have centralized consensus, but you have consensus happening in different clusters around the network. And thereby, if you have funds in these clusters, and these clusters then do their own confirmations, that way you can scale horizontally, so to speak, because each of these, the clusters won't have to wait on each other.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello. Question about updating the underlying protocol. So with blockchain-based currencies, you can update the protocol by forking the network. How would this work with IOTA and with the Tangle?
Well, as we've done before, we do a snapshot, and we'd release a new IRE version, and you would have a new transaction structure.
Yeah, okay. And now snapshots are coordinated centrally, but in the future, you can do your own snapshots whenever you want. So, so how does this then relate to updating the network? Is it still updatable? the protocol, I mean.
That depends. I mean, you know, I see where you're coming at this. We're not sure whether that case will arise. It probably will at some point. We're hoping that the final design that we're going for at the moment, which is not the current structure either, will be you know, future-oriented and future-resistant enough. Like, if you look at our current transaction structure, there's very little fields that contain unnecessary metadata. It's all very there's not a lot added on top of what you utterly and ultimately require to route transactions through the network, to send them, to identify them, and reference them. So maybe that case won't arrive that after we've done our final thing, we'll have to update. But in that, if we ever should have to update in that case, then yes, we'll have to figure out a solution. I'm not aware, well,
I can imagine a situation far in the future, maybe, where the hash function has to be updated because it's, you know, it's outdated. That happens to hash functions.
Yes, of course.
Right?
So what you would probably have then is some kind of transition period or similar, during which you solve this problem and accept all approaches as well, and then you will have the network accept moving on to something new. Then, arguably, of course, it becomes a complete separate question of how you're going to update all these IoT devices. You can have protocols and standards identified through the network, essentially, that tell devices what the current version is and stuff like that. This goes very, like the actual update or the actual code that's running on devices at the end also partially depends on implementation details of these devices.
Okay. I have one more question about MEM. What happens if I spam the network with big chunks of data? So I'm going to stream movies on the Tangle and go.
Well, if you've got the computing power to do that, I guess that's possible.
So
like at the moment, a transaction can contain about 1.2 kilobytes of data.
Ah, okay.
So if you then
there is a restriction.
Well, a transaction has a fixed size, and each transaction requires proof of work before it's accepted by a network. So yes, there is a restriction.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that didn't hurt.
So for viewers at home, someone else got a cube at the back of his head. Anyway, back to the question. Speaking of MAM and all the data that gets onto the network, so someone was suggesting streaming movies, but just genuine, temperature data. So there are like 1 billion devices in the world that stream their temperature every, whatever is practical. Then you're going to have a huge amount of temperature data,
right?
That's awesome. But it's a huge amount, probably.
Yes, sorry. That was a good joke here. Quite independent of regarding huge. But so the thing is with all these data transactions is that they don't contain any value, right? So nothing, you know, there's no real guarantee, and there's also no economic incentive for other parties to necessarily broadcast them throughout the whole network. So there always might be nodes that decide, you know, I'm not going to hold on to these zero-value transactions unless I absolutely have to, unless, well, or starting if they're ordered at a specific point in time or similar. So,
okay.
Like there's if you're looking at this economically, there is no guarantee that these transactions will be persisted until eternity.
Okay, like what is it called, IOFS or something? No, there's some kind of distributed file system that's.
Planetary file system.
Yeah, that one.
Okay. More questions? One here. In the back too, or? Okay.
I have a question about flash channels and winterness addresses.
And what?
Winterness addresses, winterness signing.
Yes.
If you sign once with a winterness address, it's still very unlikely that you crack the private key, right?
Yes.
Is that still true if we have quantum computers?
Please do.
Yeah, throw it.
I mean, you've been wanting to reply to that beforehand as well.
Yes.
Okay, the idea is this. It goes back to the idea of the IPsec, and the way that we used to do IPsec is the fact that you would say that there would be a limit on a session key between two parties that were talking that would last for either 60 minutes or 100 megabytes. And then it would rekey and do a rekey process every 60 minutes or 100 megs. In this situation, because of the fact that you're talking about that the key happens for every transaction, you can take and you can basically save it each time that you decide that you're going to do another transaction, whether it's going to be 2 minutes or whether it's going to be 10 minutes or whether it's going to be 20 seconds, you're going to be able to take and save it, whatever data that I'm putting off to the side out of this, or otherwise, I'm going to be able to say that it holds a different key and a different modulus for all the encryption that happens of it. So the idea is that basically, even if you do have a quantum computer that can crack it, it's going to have to be for whatever size of data that you're going to be transporting back and forth. It's going to be able to crack that data open at a frequency and speed that it will be able to get you more than just a piece of what's supposed to be sent back and forth.
Okay.
Make sense? Okay.
Next question.
Hopefully simple question. Still wrapping my head around it. With the perma nodes, with the pruning, how do you prove the integrity of the data if the other messages that you deem irrelevant are removed from it? So I have a temperature sensor, it broadcasts every 5 minutes. I save all my temperature data, but the tips and the transactions confirming my transaction will be gone.
Well, if you want to prove integrity, then the burden of proof is up to you. I mean, you're interested in integrity, and a node gives you specific data, but maybe that node doesn't own the complete history that this references. So what you have to decide for yourself is how many transactions do I want to go into? Do I want to be able to go into the history before to determine whether I accept this as whether I accept that this transaction or your data has enough integrity. So if your node doesn't hold it, then you will have to retrieve that from somewhere else.
True, and I want to do the best I can, but I don't have terabytes of storage space on my perma node. So to have a simple data logger.
Right, but like if you're owning that perma node, then you can always just decide by yourself that you will always persist a specific amount of transactions. And I would argue that given the size of each individual transaction, there is not that much required.
Yes, but how can somebody validate if my enough is enough for him? Because I could spoof quite a tangle, perhaps, that might have no relevance in history. It seems valid.
You mean you can change historical data?
Yes.
Well, but if it's now another party, like you know, each transaction as part of its transaction hash always encodes the other two transactions it refers to.
Yeah.
So if someone else doesn't agree with your understanding of integrity for your data, then the burden of proof is on them to figure out where to else get those transactions from.
And you'd buy a service of another perma node to see if it
I would argue that that person would do so then, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, but then you have a sort of a centralization.
Well, not necessarily,
because
depending
it's not
on how many.
between two parties.
Well,
depending on if you steer it towards two parties specifically,
yes.
That would be the answer of yes. But if you took any, but then if you steered it towards two specific parties, that the answer would be yes. But the trick about it is that if you're going to go random on the nodes, you could do that. Plus, on top of that, each one of the people that you would talk to would have to figure out how to get a cryptographically correct interpretation of something that would represent integrity. So that would take quantum computers to be able to figure out the backward step of producing that, and they still wouldn't probably be that fast.
If that answer works for you, it certainly does for me.
More questions? Anybody?
Anyone up there on the first floor?
Yeah, but they use the mic from the sound guy. We're not going to turn it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
Why not?
Maybe one for the video, but then.
All right.
No questions?
No questions?
Okay.
No. Well done.
Okay, thank you.